Hi Grade 10s! In this video we will be talking about urban environmental issues. So in the 1700s, burning coal was popularized in people's homes. Typically, young boys were employed to sweep out chimneys that were covered in soot, and eventually it was noticed that these boys were developing high incidental rates of certain types of cancer, and that was linked to contact with the soot. So in 1775, the government decided to do something about this, and they raised the minimum age from 4 years old to 8 years old, which by today's standards is pretty wild. But I thought we would start with this to just highlight how sometimes in the past, how environmental issues are dealt with typically wouldn't pass by today's standards, and these standards are constantly evolving. So just something to keep in mind. So urban environmental issues include pollution, like air pollution, noise pollution, light pollution, as well as garbage and trash. And we're also going to talk about green space a little bit. So air pollution. This photo is from Beijing. This was not during the pandemic, and wearing masks is just a normal everyday thing in some parts of the world to deal with air pollution and poor air quality. So some of the long-term health effects from poor air quality include heart disease, lung cancer, and respiratory diseases, as well as nerve issues, kidney issues, liver issues, and other major organ issues. And some scientists believe that air pollutants cause birth defects. And then there's just a graphic with some of the major contributors to air pollution. So in urban spaces over here on the green side, we have transportation, poor waste management practices like burning garbage, and also industry and energy supply. So a solution to poor air quality is switching to renewable energy sources. So switching from things like coal, burning fossil fuels, which emits pollutants, to things like solar energy. There is a drawback to this. This often isn't a feasible solution in developing countries. Investment in sustainable energy is very expensive, and burning fossil fuel or coal is significantly cheaper. There are policies in place where right now world leaders have met recently, such as the during like the Paris Agreement, where reduction in carbon emissions was discussed, and developing countries argued that they should be allowed to pollute using the burning of fossil fuels, because European countries and other developed places have been allowed to do so for centuries without consequences, and that is the only reason that they are in economic power right now. So, for example, here is a photo from London, and as you can see, air pollution was a huge problem there in the past. So it's kind of like a catching up sort of argument for not switching to renewable energy sources. And also to take into consideration, Canada has set goals to move towards reducing carbon emissions and things, but in some places like Manitoba, that's a lot more challenging than in other provinces. Manitoba already gets 97% of its electricity from hydropower, so hydroelectric dams, whereas Alberta gets 91% of its electricity from fossil fuel consumption. So it would be much more feasible for Alberta to meet these uh, goals in terms of sustainability. But in Manitoba, where our practices are already pretty good, there's a much bigger challenge. So just something to consider. So another solution to poor air quality is road space rationing. So, for example, in Beijing, they have a car lottery. So, enable to buy or enable or in a to be able to buy a new car, you need to be selected from the car license lottery. So, you can go ahead and you can buy a new car, but you won't be able to drive it on the road without a license. And only about 1 in 2,000 applicants are granted a license. And some people are on these wait lists for years and years and years. For example, they have a 50-lane highway in Beijing. So in order to reduce traffic congestion, they've also implemented license plate restrictions. So for example, if your license plate starts with, I don't know, numbers 1 through 3, you're only allowed to drive on certain roads on, say, Mondays and Wednesday mornings. And if you don't follow the rules, then you'll face a fine. And the Chinese government claims that restrictions like these have reduced emissions by 40%. And you can see here, there are these two ladies, and they are drawing numbers for the car license lottery. Another solution is congestion pricing, which was introduced in London in 2003. So if you drive into the core city of London and one of these cameras catches your license plate, and trust me, they're everywhere, between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday to Friday, you are charged £11.50, which is about $20 Canadian each day. So that deters people from driving in this area, and it has greatly reduced the amount of traffic. They've also been able to convert some roadways back into public spaces, like meant for walking and green spaces and things as a result of less traffic. And other cities have also started to adopt this too. So this was meant to be rolled out in New York City around now, but that's been pushed back to the end of 2020. And you can see these are some areas with cameras, mostly around the perimeter, but then also inside. So another solution would be to implement strict emission standards. So under the Clean Air Act, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, sets emission standards for new motor vehicles. And this is the standard that Manitoba follows. So in Manitoba, in order to drive your car on the road, you need to pass the emission standards, which cars come standard like that, right out of the factory. And they are often updated, and there's controversy right now as California is trying to keep its stricter emission standards in place, and the American federal government is fighting them. And MPI has said that if California is allowed to keep their stricter emission standards, that Manitoba will also adopt these stricter emission standards. And so here is a picture of a Cadillac converter that's in the exhaust system of a car. And so before the exhaust passes out of the car, out of the exhaust pipe, it goes through this, and it basically acts like a filter, and it traps pollutants inside. And it's illegal to take them out, if you're wondering. So noise pollution is another urban issue associated with many adverse health effects, such as cardiovascular disorders, hypertension, high stress levels, tinnitus, and hearing loss. So noise pollution from cars, from construction, things like that. It also negatively affects wildlife that may live nearby. things like that. And just generally is kind of unpleasant. So the city of Hamburg, Germany decided to fix this problem. They are along the Autobahn 7, which is here, which stretches all across Germany. And so what they decided to do is they undertook it's still in progress. They are undertaking a giant construction project where they are covering the highway and building green space and housing on top in a few sections. So this is an example of what it's going to look like when it's completed. Though the cars are going to be underground, greenery also helps stop some of the noise pollution because the trees and other greenery just kind of suck in the noise, whereas concrete, it just kind of bounces back. So light pollution. So at night, you may have noticed, even over Arburg, that the sky doesn't actually get dark, and in most urban centers, you can't actually see any stars. Arburg, you can on most nights. But this orange glow causes a lot of adverse effects. In humans, it can cause sleep problems, and in animals, it's even worse. Animals are very used to a natural sleep-wake cycle based on day and night. So when they enter an urban area or pass by an urban area that's covered in light pollution, they get lost and confused and often die. This is particularly disruptive to sea turtles and also migratory birds. So one solution to light pollution, I'm sorry, that was very cheesy, would be a lights out program. So many cities have adopted a lights out program where lights at night will be turned off in order to accommodate migratory birds. And this is shown to be effective, which is pretty neat. So this is just a poster from Atlanta, but many cities have adopted this. So another solution is to improve the design elements in urban areas. So even simple streetlights can be problematic. So most streetlights look like one of these two, but realistically, all of this light above the streetlight is totally wasted and you're just disturbing birds. So an effective solution would be to choose streetlights that beam the light down where it's actually going to be useful to humans and not put out into the world and will be disruptive. So garbage is another obvious urban environmental issue. People produce garbage. It's just how we work. And when you put a lot of people in one place, you're obviously going to have an abundance of garbage. So what some urban centers have done is put restrictions on how people can dispose of waste. So for example, in some cities, like Markham, Ontario, for example, you have to put your garbage in clear bags, and you will face a fine if the sanitation employees find recycling or compost in your garbage. A lot of cities also offer compost pickup in addition to garbage and recycling so that compost and other biodegradable things don't end up in the landfill. And some cities also have a garbage tag system where, for example, here, so you would get one garbage tag per week, and then every garbage bag needs a tag, and that's it. And then if you want to buy more garbage tags to dispose of more trash, then you need to purchase the extra tags from city offices. And they're usually pretty expensive. I know in Carmen, Manitoba, which is not a city, but they have a similar program. And so every family is allowed one bag of garbage per week. And if you go over that, it is $4 per bag of garbage. So this deters people from being wasteful, as it's expensive to dispose of garbage, but recycling pickup is free. So it encourages people to utilize recyclable materials and question their purchasing decisions before buying things. And so this is an urban environmental issue, although it's not quite on the scale of air pollution or garbage issues. So these are desire lines. This is the Duckworth Quad at U of M. So there's a nice sidewalk all the way around, but people, no matter what, it seems, will walk through the easiest path possible. And so these are called desire lines, and they often disrupt green spaces. So this is actually a city planning project, but it leads to an environmental issue as green spaces get decimated by people that just walk through spaces and create desire lines. So green space. So many urban issues can be addressed with the addition of public green spaces. Green spaces help filter air pollution as the plants take in carbon dioxide and other pollutants, and they also create a buffer for noise and light. Green spaces are also shown to improve the mental health of residents. However, unfortunately, retrofitting green spaces into already existing urban areas can be very difficult because in a lot of places, urban land is very expensive. So, for example, Central Park in New York City, Central Park's been there for a very long time, but the value of the land under the park is worth roughly $35 billion, which is wild. So you can imagine how costly it would be to try to build a new park in an urban center that wasn't already existing. So state of the world today being Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. So in light of the world kind of being shut down, the Earth has kind of bounced back from a lot of this pollution. So for example, this photo is from New Delhi in India. You can see the smog has been significantly reduced. And over China, you can see there's a significant reduction in air pollution. So it's just kind of an interesting thing that's happening. People aren't traveling around. Factories are shut down. Plants are shut down. The world's basically shut down. So it's just kind of interesting to see how quickly the world can bounce back and if there will be any changes to environmental policy moving forward. So that's all the new content for today. So for the daily questions, there are only 2. So do you think signs of improved air quality during the COVID-19 pandemic will affect climate change policy? Why or why not? And who has more control over combating urban environmental issues? Individuals or the government? Why or why not? And when I say individuals, I mean collectively all individuals, not like one person as a person. All right, that's everything for today. Thank you.